Welcome to painting a hibiscus in Holbein Watercolours. I'm Jude Scott and I'm going to guide you through the drawing, the shading and the painting of this beautiful hibiscus. First of all, draw a circle, and then I've put where the centre of that stamen is, and it's actually not in the centre, it's higher, much higher than the centre. So if you use that as a guide and just draw a line across the top, probably the 1/3 of the flower, you can see that all the petals and the stamen base meet up, and then you can just draw straight up from the stamen to work out where your petals sit within the circle that forms the hibiscus flower. There's always areas where something will meet up with something else. I call it mapping and plumbing. So the stamen is almost at 6 o'clock on the paper, and if you look down carefully, you'll be able to see where those petals sit and the shapes that they make. This next petal, where that line comes down and meets the top petal, it sort of curves out gently. Always do your basic shapes first, and then you can put in these turnbacks, those gorgeous little frills on the edge of the hibiscus petal. And I'm doing this in a dark blue pen. I won't be able to rub it out, but it will enable you to see clearly where the frills on the petals are and where the actual petals sit next to each other quite easily. So this flower is actually tilted down toward the ground, so that's why this top petal here is foreshortened. So it was a strange shape to draw. It was almost a rectangle. Now I've got a pencil, a 2B mechanical pencil, and I'm just going to quickly shade in the tones on this petal. Even though the flower is a really bright, it's absolutely eye-watering yellow, it still has tone, and to be able to paint it successfully, you've got to be able to match the tone in your yellow to the tone in the flower. So here I'm using just a black and white photo, which is often easier to see the tones than if you use a coloured photograph. And doing a thumbnail sketch like this at the very beginning allows you to see where the shadows are, where the lights and darks are, and you can always see exactly where the object is in relation to everything else around it. So it'll make your painting so much easier. The better you can draw a subject, the better you'll be able to paint it, even if you're only going to paint it in an abstract fashion. A detailed drawing and a detailed shading is so important. It's well worth taking that extra 20 minutes or so just to draw it up and shade it in. Whether it's a flower or a glass bottle or a landscape, just a quick thumbnail sketch makes it much easier to draw. Last week the class painted a beautiful peony, and we did a detailed drawing of that, and everybody found that they could paint it so much easier. So the tones on my drawing are very, very close. The tones are the same as the black and white image that we've been using, or the grayscale print of the hibiscus. For the background, I've decided to go and start obviously the background first, but I've decided to do that rather than paint the image first because it will give us a reference for tone. Because the petals of the hibiscus are really very light, they're very, very bright, but when I check them with a tonal value scale, they're only about a 1.5 from a 1 to 5 tonal value scale. So they're very light, but they're also very bright. So for the background here, I want really dark, the same as the image, which is about a number 5 in places. So I want it really dark. I'm using Holbein Prussian Blue, which is really stunning colour. It's very staining, very intense. You don't need to use much of it at all. And with that, I've mixed neutral tint and some quinacridone gold. So the neutral tint and quinacridone gold produce that lovely warm green in the lower left-hand section of the background. And I really like using that combination for my greens. I don't actually have a green in my paint box. I do use Viridian from time to time, but I really love mixing my own greens. It's very satisfying to do that. Right even at this stage, I'm softening the edges of the petals because Prussian Blue is so staining that if I leave it to dry on the paper, sometimes you can't get the hard edges off. So always soften your edges right at the beginning. Rinse, like I'm using a 1-inch flat brush, rinse that really well, dry it on your sponge, and you can lift out marks as well. So if you want some lights in amongst that dark, it could be maybe sunlight sparkling through, it might be sunlight on the ground, but that's a great thing to do. That's also just the first stage of our background. Now I'm moving up into the flower, the petals, starting with the top left hand side, which is always a good place to start because as I'm painting down, you don't sort of have your hand in wet paint, as I do at the moment. I've got to watch that my sleeve doesn't end up looking as dark green as the background. And because that petal has a little bit of shadow there, if you just put a little bit of the green that we've used for the background into your yellow, not much, just a touch, you can see that how that's gone dark. You don't need to do it a grey. Grey at this stage, especially on this lovely brilliant yellow sunny flower, would tend to dull it down. So I've just made it a green. So quite intense colour, not a lot of water mixed with that. And then you can just leave that to set for a moment on the paper and drag it down to combine with the warmer area in that petal, which is down just above where it curves out from the stamen. It's always a good idea with your petals, with your leaves, whatever you're mixing, to have warm and cool in the same colour. It just makes it look a lot more lifelike. Not that I mind an abstract look, but if you want to have depth and dimension in your work, yes, change the temperature of your pigment. So have warm and have cool. So down here I've actually mixed, I haven't told you what I've used. I've mixed some Quinacridone Red with my Aureolin Yellow to produce that beautiful warm colour in the petal. I know that that original image is not exactly as warm as that, but I'm using that for two reasons. Because I do need to have some contrast between the petals to make it look like a painting, not a photograph, and I don't want it to look botanical. I want it a lot more loose than a botanical painting. And again, there with the shadow, I've just added a little bit of green to that puddle of quite wet paint on the paper. And the paper that I'm using is, it was a Layton paper. Somebody had given me a sheet to try and it turned out to work really well. So it's Layton paper. I'm not sure where it's from, but it was really great to paint on. Where this petal laps over the one behind it, I've put some very soft purple in there because purple is the complementary colour of yellow, and it will look a lot more intense and a lot more lifelike than if I put just a dull grey in there. So you have a lot more life in your painting and it looks more vibrant. Again, just keep those edges in places soft and fading out into your background. So here I'm just really slashing on some colour, leaving little gaps of white in between because the centre of that hibiscus, as it billows out with that gorgeous colour, it has got sort of stripes of white, streaks of white. So then I can get those to flow back toward the centre of the hibiscus, just using water and perhaps a touch of green later on. So in this particular area of the background, be careful that you don't let that vivid green dry, otherwise you won't get that mark off your paper. So I thought about what colour to use for the background, and because again purple is a complementary of, or the opposite colour on the colour wheel of yellow, I've put purple in. And while I certainly wouldn't leave it as bold as that, I'll be able to put some green over the top of that in places, and it will just look really good and come up looking interesting, and give me a nice background effect that I'm after. Now, as you can see, the paper that I'm putting the pigment on by now is very wet, so whatever I touch onto the paper flows all over the place beautifully. I just love that look. So if you like very soft wet in wet backgrounds, that's the way to do it. Put tons of water on. Don't be afraid of water, and it will just work magnificently for you in your painting of your hibiscus. It's very dark at the moment, but because it is so wet, it will also fade a lot. Usually the more water you put with your paint, the more it fades. So it'll probably fade about 20%. So again, using a 1-inch flat brush, soften those edges, and you can do that easily by pushing that pigment from the flower out into the background. Don't go the other way, or you'll drag your background into the flower and you might not be happy at all with those results. So you can see already that dark background has faded, so I'm putting a touch of purple into that. And where I put the original puddle of purple in the top left-hand corner, it's now disappeared and faded quite a lot into that dark green. So I'm going to finish off now. So what's left to do? Well, there's a few edges there that need tidying up, and other things need to be made a little bit more intense. So on the right hand side of the stamen there's a bit of shadow, so I need to restate my colours there. And for the tone where there's that dark little circle around the stamen, I'm just going to put a soft purple tone and then drag that out with some water. The purple that I've used is Cobalt and Quinacridone Red. So it was quite bright for the top left-hand corner, but down here it's a softer, lighter tone that I've made just by adding water to the puddle of pigment that was there. And you can see now that the stamen is standing out quite nicely on that paper. So now that this petal has dried, I can restate my colours. So restating your colours is what you can do when your paper's completely dry. I've just sprayed some water on that just to speckle the background a fraction, and I want some warmer veins coming down into those areas of paint. It just adds a bit of direction to where the petal is curving outwards, and it enables you to see that yes, it's definitely got 3 dimensions to that petal. If your flower is still very wet underneath and you want to layer more colour on top, please wait till it's completely dry. If you start doing top layers like this of pigment over damp paper, it will look okay for a while, but when it dries it will start to look muddy. So if you wait for it to be completely dry, or dry it with a hairdryer, allow it to cool, and you'll find that your pigment will sit on top of the previous layer underneath. It won't sink in and make it all muddy. and it will help your colours to stay fresh and vibrant. And that's what I've really aimed for here, is very fresh, vibrant colours. So I want to restate some of those darks in the background because they've faded so much. But you'll notice that I'm not putting the dark up to the edges of the flower everywhere. In a couple of places, yes, but not everywhere. I love the saying, same but different. So move it around a little bit, have warm and cool in your background, and have light and dark in your background. It's a magic combination and you can't go wrong. So a little bit more purple up there, and add some more dark where that's also faded out. So that green will drift into that purple and just take a little bit of the vibrancy out of it. So that was some interaction from the students. Now we're going to finish off the centre where the little stamens are with the pollen. So load your brush with Quinacridone Gold, Aureolin Yellow and Burnt Sienna. And if you splatter, but please mask off your paper with a hole torn in newspaper, kitchen paper, anything, and you will be able to get the most gorgeous, natural looking centre there. You can also just put dots on. It never looks as effective as if, or artistic, as if you've just splattered it onto paper. Don't worry too much. If you've got it masked off to protect the rest of your painting, you can get some gorgeous centres in flowers like that. So I do hope that has given you the confidence to have a go and paint a gorgeous yellow hibiscus. Thanks for watching.